Today we're going to be learning how to paint the skin. Painting the skin can be a bit of a challenge, and there are numerous ways you can do it. In this video, I'm going to be sharing how I personally do it, and it's actually pretty simple. So yeah, let's go ahead and explore some solutions that I've learned throughout my experience. So here we have our skin. First, get your preferred skin tone. I usually pick my colors around here. I highly recommend getting a muted color or colors that are in this area. You can actually choose any color you want as long as they're neutral or muted, because it's going to be easier to add saturation and values later on. Now, using a multiply layer for the shadows, I often choose around the warm colors, like red or orange, but it's completely situational. For example, the background can greatly influence your shadows, like the sky for example. The light from the sky would give your shadows this bluish color, because as we know, light bounces. If you're just starting out, I recommend painting solid shadows first, because if you start with soft shadows like these, you might end up with a not so good rendering, because there are proper ways to use them, but we'll get there soon. Next is adding midtones. Midtones are basically the middle value. It's not too dark or too light. It's really good when you want to add that extra dimension to your paintings. I usually use a multiply layer and then paint the midtones on the light areas. Just make sure that it's not darker than your shadows. Next one is just highlights. You just put them on the direction of your light source. Lastly, we have bounce light. Like I said earlier, the background can reflect on the subject, and it's usually the blue sky. So we're gonna add some blue color using an overlay layer. The same process also works for darker skin tones, with a few changes with the colors. You can change the colors however you want. I usually like using a bluish color for the shadow, because I think it looks a lot interesting. I also use a warm color for the midtones to contrast the shadow, and then add the finishing touches like the highlights and the bounce light. Now, the skin can be a lot more complex than this, and there's a bunch of other ways to shade it, but it still follows the same principle, so keep it in mind. Now let's apply that into a character. I'll also be using the face as an example, because it's the hardest body part to draw, and it's more fun. So, get a base color of your choice. Again, choose a neutral or muted colors. Now, anatomy is also crucial when painting the skin, because the facial feature, muscles, and the bones will be visible and would naturally affect how the skin is presented. After you identify where your light source is, we can now add shadows. You can decide how your shadows would look. You can either make it warm or cool, depending on your style preference. You can even do both if you like. Next is midtones. When picking your midtones, make sure it's the same hue as your base color, or at least close to it. Then make it darker than your base, but lighter than your shadows. Hence the name midtones. You can also use some textured brush to make it a lot interesting. I also use a lot of color blending. Here I'm using a smudging brush. It is important to balance out hard edges and soft edges, so it doesn't look cloudy. For the final touch, I'm going to add a color burn layer to add some contrast and color, and that's basically it. It's also the same way for darker skin tones. It doesn't really matter what tone you use, the same rules still apply. It's more about the proper use of colors and especially values. It's also much easier to use layer blending modes like the multiply layer. No matter what color you choose, it's going to be darker than what you're painting on, so no need to study color theory. Just kidding. Please learn it, it's going to help you a lot. Remember, all of these are just tools to make your life easier. Raw knowledge and experience is more important. For this piece, I'm relying on a bunch of reference. Not just for the character design, but also for the lighting and values. Because it's really hard to come up with this stuff. It's probably going to take me another 10 years or so to do this properly without any reference. And here is the final piece. I must say there's still a lot of room for improvement, so if you're a beginner, don't make this as your standard. Make real life reference as your standard, because you're going to be better off with that. Now, when painting the skin, it is important to know a bit of anatomy, because it's going to help you a lot in deciding when and where to put your shadows. Let's take the face for example. Knowing the structure of the face would help you a lot, primarily the skull. You see, the skull is really important when it comes to painting the face. It is essentially the foundation of the face. Knowing those anatomy details can guide you into shading the skin, because shading is pretty easy. The only problem is what you're shading. So yeah, the skin is a combination of anatomy and lighting. When you understand those two, painting the skin will get a lot easier. For me, anime illustration can be classified into two types: painting art style and clean render. Painting art style falls on semi-realistic style, and from the name itself you would expect these kinds of artworks, with textured brushes, loose sketches, and semi-realistic values. If you prefer a messy style painting, or if you just want to paint like you would on a canvas, this is the style you want. This style of painting has a lot more freedom than the other style. Okay, here's the full process of how I do painting art style. This is a study I made for this video. I started off with blocking the whole character with a shadow layer, and then I erased some of them to shape it and separate which part is in shadow and which part is in light. Here, I added some redness to the face to add a little life to the skin. This technique of using the lasso tool and an airbrush is a really good way to create a 3D shade and a gradient without painting over your stuff. This also helps you avoid muddy paintings. Most of the time I spent on this painting is just making sure that I place proper values and adding some texture by smudging some details. The focus here is building up the shadows here first, so we can add colors later on. Having good shadows or proper values is crucial before we can do any coloring. Once I got some decent values, I started adding some color. I added some yellow lights on the hair using an overlay. Then I did a bunch of other adjustments. Then I started working on the face. The face looked really pale, so to add some life to the skin, we're gonna use an overlay layer to paint a reddish tone to the skin. There's also this thing called subsurface scattering. Subsurface scattering is when light goes into a translucent material, bounces around inside, and then comes out somewhere else. This effect is important for making materials like skin, marble, and wax look realistic. This is my favorite part when painting the skin, because it makes it look so good. It also makes it feel more alive because of the blood reflecting through the skin. It's mostly found on the ears, fingers, and other parts of the body where light can easily pass through or reflect. You would mostly see this on the edges of the shadows. Try not to overdo it and always study when and how to use it, because it's gonna have more impact if you use it properly. And this should be finished. This was of course a study from this reference. It's AI whatever, I just like how it looked, so I decided to do a study of the lighting in the skin. Anyway, I really like the result of this study. Next illustration style is clean render or cel shading. The main idea of this process is line art, clean render, and organized setup. You can also call this cel shading, because they kind of have the same principle. They both have solid colors, shadows, and of course a clean line art. In anime, shadows are often simplified. Typically, characters consist of a base color with solid shadows. And sometimes, if they're feeling fancy, they would add rim lights to further capture the sense of three-dimensionality. But it's not limited by those standards. You can add other fundamentals as well, such as texture, values, and color. Anime style has evolved into a wide range of style. Sometimes it looks like this, and sometimes it can look like this. First, you would need a line art and a base color. Let's also add a background. Now, it's just the same process as before. We'll now block in the main shadows. For this, I'm using a bluish or cool shadow because of the sky. I'll also add a bit of subsurface scattering around the edges of the shadows. Next is adding more values into the mix. It's just blending and adding texture, and maybe even adding more color to add more interest. Add a little bounce light and some effects, and we're done. The result can either be simpler or more difficult than this. It's totally up to you. Now, everyone knows that references are crucial when you're doing art studies and improving your art skills, though sometimes it can get really boring and unmotivating. Because if you're like me, I tend to be really messy and unorganized with my studies. That was until I started using Milanote. Milanote is an online tool for organizing creative projects. It combines the functionality of a note-taking app with the flexibility of a whiteboard, allowing users to visually organize their ideas, notes, images, links, and tasks. Some of Milanote's features include visual boards, templates, collaboration, where you can share your board and collaborate in real time with your friend. Milanote also has this cool web clipper browser extension, in which you can use to collect images everywhere in the internet. Just drag your mouse in the image, and there's going to be a Milanote button, which allows you to save that image directly to your board. I mostly use this feature on Pinterest, Google, and Twitter. The way I use Milanote is I divide my study by assigning tasks each day. They're like a to-do list that I have to accomplish that day. It includes fundamental studies like lighting, color theory, and anatomy. I've recently been focusing on my anatomy skills, and Milanote helps me keep track of my progress. and at the same time collect useful references that I can study in an organized manner. And then there's the web clipper extension, which I use every day since I found out about it. It's just really convenient whenever I'm casually scrolling through the internet. I can just save images that I like really quickly. Milnote is free to use without any time restrictions. Sign up using the link in the description and start your next creative project. If you enjoyed using Milnote, let me know down in the comments. Grayscale. Color is actually pretty overrated if you don't know how to create decent values first, because colors alone can make your drawings three-dimensional. If you don't know what grayscale is, it's basically a black and white painting. It's a really helpful workflow if you want to make your drawings realistic as possible, because in this way we are focusing more on the values, lighting, and form. These fundamentals are quite essential if you want to make your drawings lifelike without worrying about color theory. In painting grayscale, I like to work on big to small. So first is covering everything in shadows, and work on smaller things later on. So major form first and then details. In doing grayscale, you have to know one simple rule, which is knowing how light and shadow works. It's just basically just areas that are in light and areas that are in dark, and everything else in between. Well, it's kind of more complex than that, but it's a decent start. You can study black and white paintings to get a good sense of values. Painting from real life is the way to improve your eyes and understand depth and lighting. Doing skin studies from real people is the easiest way to get a grasp of painting the skin. And to further improve your painting skills, I highly suggest learning from other artists. There are tons of good artists out there that truly gets how to paint the skin in any mood, any color, and any way they want. So let's learn some. Here's an example from the artist Radon. Sorry if I pronounced that incorrectly. I came across this artwork that they made. I really like these examples of lighting effects, so let's study a couple. Okay, here I made a different character to use as an example. Let's take this one as an example first. Here I chose a lighter skin tone. This way we don't have to add lighting later on. This will already serve as the lightened area, so we only need to add shadows and midtones. We can tell that there's one light source coming from the right side, so the other side would be in shadow. Now you might notice different shades of values, but we're going to start with the darkest and move up to the lighter shadows. The main shadow has this reddish dark brown that shapes the face. This part is the farthest from the light source, so it's naturally the darkest part. I also changed the saturation in the parts that are not the skin, and added a bit of bounce light. It is then followed by lighter shadows that are closer to the light. Then finally, there's this subtle mid-tone that's around the nose, cheeks, ear, and I also like to add some on random areas of the skin. Then erase some parts to add highlights, a bit of adjustments, and a color burn finish. Now for the second one, we have two light sources, and I'm guessing this is golden hour, so everything is golden. So first, we're gonna fill everything with a golden color using a multiply layer. Then we can work on the shadows. You can also notice there's a shadow while casting in a direction, so I'm gonna guess the bounce light is coming from this direction. So we're just gonna do what we have been doing, add consistent shadows and details based on the angle of the light, then we'll add that window light using an overlay and a yellow color. I also made it different from the original to make it more interesting. Next example we have is a light source coming directly above our character. So again, everything would already be in light, and we're just going to be adding shadow. For the shadow, I'm going to be using this dark reddish color. This is kind of like the first one, but instead of working on the details on the light, we're going to do it in the shadows. So again, light bounces, so it would reflect around the curved planes of the face. You can study the Asaro head so that you can be more familiar with the planes of the face, because that's also crucial if you want to master painting the face. And that's it. Hopefully you find this helpful, and as always, I'll see you in the next one. God bless. Peace.